Okay, I need you to think about something for a second. Take everything you know about chimpanzees, the politics, the rivalries, the calculated aggression, the constant social tension of a species where power is everything and trust is always conditional. Now imagine a primate that shares 99.6% of its DNA with the chimpanzee, almost identical genetically, living in the same kind of forest environment, eating similar food, facing similar ecological pressures, and yet, psychologically, almost the complete opposite. Where chimps resolve conflict through dominance and intimidation, this animal resolves it through contact and reconciliation. Where chimp society is male-dominated and hierarchically rigid, this animal lives in a society where females hold the social power. Where chimp encounters between rival groups can turn dangerous, this animal has been observed meeting strangers and within minutes behaving as if they've known each other for years. Same DNA, completely different social world. The animal is the bonobo, and the question of how two species this genetically similar ended up with such radically different psychologies is one of the most fascinating puzzles in all of primate science. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to Primal Mind. So if you've been following this channel for a while, and if you haven't, welcome, subscribe. There's a lot of good stuff here. You'll know we did a deep dive on chimpanzee psychology a few videos back. And that video went into some pretty dark territory. The political maneuvering, the strategic deception, the coordinated aggression between rival groups. And a lot of you left comments asking essentially the same question. Is this just what primates are like? Is this just what intelligence looks like when it evolves in a social species? Today's video is the answer to that question, and the answer is no. It's really, really not. Because bonobos exist, and bonobos change everything about what we thought we knew about primate nature. First things first, bonobos are not a type of chimpanzee. They are a separate species, classified alongside chimps as our two closest living relatives. Humans, chimps, and bonobos all share approximately 98.7% of our DNA. We are equally related to both. But here's the thing that always gets me. Most people have never even heard of bonobos. Ask someone to name the great apes and they'll say gorillas, chimps, orangutans. Bonobos almost never come up. And I think that's a genuine loss because in terms of what they reveal about primate psychology and about human nature, they might be the most important animal we're not paying attention to. Part of the reason bonobos are understudied is geography. They live exclusively in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a region that has faced significant political instability for decades, making long-term field research extremely difficult and dangerous. The data we have on wild bonobos is far less comprehensive than what we have on chimps, but what we do have is extraordinary. And it tells a story about a completely different path that primate social evolution can take. Drop a comment below if you knew what a bonobo was before this video. I'm genuinely curious how many people have come across them before. So what actually makes bonobo society so different? The most striking thing, the thing that researchers keep coming back to, is that bonobo social life is built around empathy and reconciliation in a way that simply has no parallel among the other great apes. When conflict arises in a bonobo group, and conflict does arise, they're not some kind of perfectly peaceful utopia. The resolution almost always involves social contact, grooming, play, physical closeness. The animals involved move toward each other rather than away. The tension gets absorbed back into the social fabric rather than escalating or festering. Franz de Waal, who spent decades studying both chimps and bonobos, described the difference this way. In chimp society, sex follows power. In bonobo society, it seems to be the other way around. Social bonding and reconciliation take priority over competition and dominance. What this produces over time is a social environment with dramatically lower baseline tension than chimp society. Bonobos in stable groups show lower stress hormone levels than chimps in comparable situations. They are more willing to share food with strangers, more likely to help individuals they have no prior relationship with, more responsive to the emotional states of others around them. This is not just behavioral niceness. This is a fundamentally different emotional orientation. One that prioritizes social cohesion over individual advantage in a way that, if you think about it, is actually the harder evolutionary path to take. Okay, so this is the part of bonobo society that I think surprises people the most, and honestly, it should. In almost every other primate species we've covered on this channel, social power is primarily held by males. Chimp alpha males, silverback gorillas. Male dominance hierarchies are so consistent across primates that for a long time researchers assumed it was just how primate society worked. Bonobos proved that assumption wrong. In bonobo groups, females hold the central positions of social power, not through physical dominance. Adult males are still larger than females in body size, but through social alliances. Female bonobos form strong, stable bonds with each other, and those alliances give them collective social leverage that individual males simply cannot match. When a male bonobo behaves aggressively toward a female, the other females in the group respond together. The collective response is consistent enough that male aggression toward females in bonobo society is relatively rare, far rarer than in chimp society. Males that try to use intimidation as a social strategy find it doesn't work the way it does in other primate groups. What this tells us is genuinely important. The social structure we see in any primate group is not inevitable. It is not hardwired into primate biology. It is the outcome of specific evolutionary pressures, specific ecological contexts, and specific social strategies that got reinforced over generations. A different context produces a different society. The bonobo is proof of that. If this is making you think about things differently, hit the like button. It genuinely helps get this kind of content out to more people. Now here's something that doesn't get talked about enough: bonobo intelligence. Because when people hear empathetic and peaceful and female-led, there's a tendency to unconsciously assume we're talking about a simpler animal. A less cognitively complex one, like social harmony, must come at the cost of individual intelligence. That assumption is completely wrong. Bonobos demonstrate cognitive abilities that rival chimps across virtually every measure we have. They use tools. They solve complex problems. They pass mirror self-recognition tests. In language research, studies using lexicograms, which are symbols representing words, bonobos have demonstrated vocabulary comprehension and usage that genuinely shocked researchers. Chimpanzee, a bonobo who became one of the most studied animals in cognitive science history, learned to use a lexigram board with hundreds of symbols and demonstrated understanding of spoken English at a level comparable to a human toddler. He could follow novel spoken instructions. He could combine symbols in ways that suggested genuine understanding of meaning rather than just memorized associations. But here's the thing about bonobo intelligence that I find most interesting. Their cognitive abilities seem to be deployed differently than chimp intelligence. Chimps use intelligence heavily for competition, for social maneuvering, for outwitting rivals, for gaining individual advantage. Bonobos use intelligence heavily for connection, for reading the emotional states of others, for navigating social situations toward positive outcomes, for maintaining the relationships that their social world depends on. Same cognitive horsepower, different direction. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting for me personally. For a long time, and you still hear this argument sometimes, there was a tendency in evolutionary psychology to look at chimps and say, this is our nature. This is what humans look like before civilization. Competitive, hierarchical, prone to violence, fundamentally self-interested beneath the social veneer. And that argument has always felt incomplete to me, because it selectively ignores the other species we're equally related to. We are as closely related to bonobos as we are to chimps. Our evolutionary lineage diverged from the common ancestor of both species at roughly the same time. If chimp behavior tells us something about human nature, bonobo behavior tells us something equally valid about human nature. And what bonobos tell us is that the capacity for empathy, for social reconciliation, for building societies around cooperation rather than domination. These are not civilizational achievements layered on top of a violent primate core. They are primate capacities, ancient ones, present in our closest relatives, present, presumably, in us. The real picture of human nature is not the chimp and not the bonobo. It is the animal that carries both possibilities and has to choose, individually and collectively, which one to develop. That's a heavier thought than most animal psychology videos leave you with. But I think it's the right one. Here's the honest truth about bonobo research. We still don't fully understand them. The difficulty of conducting long-term field research in their range means that a lot of what we know about wild bonobo behavior is still incomplete. Some of the most striking findings about bonobo psychology come from captive animals, and there's always a legitimate question about how much captive behavior reflects wild behavior. What we do know from the wild research we have is consistent with the captive findings: lower aggression, stronger female alliances, more social tolerance between groups. But the full picture of wild bonobo society remains one of the most significant open questions in primatology. And I find that genuinely exciting, because it means there are still discoveries to be made, things we don't know yet about an animal this psychologically rich, behaviors that haven't been documented, questions that haven't been answered. If there's a primate researcher watching this, please go to the Congo. We need more data, and we need more people paying attention to these animals before their habitat disappears entirely. Which is worth mentioning, bonobos are endangered. Habitat loss and other pressures have reduced their population significantly. An animal this cognitively and psychologically remarkable is under serious threat. If that matters to you, and I think it should, there are organizations working on bonobo conservation that are worth knowing about. So, the primate that solved what chimps never could. What did it solve? It solved the problem that every highly intelligent social species faces. How do you maintain social cohesion in a group of individuals who all have their own interests, their own ambitions, their own needs? How do you stop competition from tearing apart the social fabric that everyone depends on? Chimps solved it with hierarchy and power, with a system where dominance is established and maintained and everyone knows their place. Bonobos solved it with empathy and reconciliation, with a system where tension is absorbed back into social connection rather than escalating into conflict. Neither solution is perfect. Both are real. Both exist in our closest relatives. And both, I would argue, exist in us, as tendencies, as capacities, as choices we make individually, and as societies about which direction we want to go. The bonobo doesn't know it's teaching us anything. It's just living the way its nature leads it to live. But if we're paying attention, really paying attention, it's one of the most important animals we have. If this video made you think about something differently, I'd genuinely love to hear about it in the comments. That's what this channel is for. And if you're not subscribed yet, we put out new videos every week, all built around the same question: what does the animal world reveal about us? Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Stay curious. Stay primal.